What if I told you that one of the greatest minds in basketball history never won a championship? Yes, Rick Adelman turned nobody teams into juggernauts and title contenders by building a tactic so overpowered, Hall of Fame coaches started stealing it to win rings. Despite never having the league's top superstars, Adelman's system took on the Jordan's Bulls, Shaq and Kobe's Lakers, built elite playoff offenses and defenses for 2 decades, and racked up well over 1,000 wins. So how did he pull this all off? The answer lies in a strategy that wouldn't just eventually put him in the Hall of Fame, it would change traditional basketball forever. To understand why it took so long for others to see Rick Adelman's genius, we have to go back to before he became one of the NBA's most innovative coaches, where he spent 7 seasons as a journeyman player in the league. Starting with the San Diego Rockets in 1968, Adelman bounced around between 5 teams including Chicago, New Orleans, and Portland. Never a star, he averaged just 7.7 points per game, but developed a reputation as a tough, high IQ player who understood the game at a deep level. But no one would expect him to create a play that every team in the league wanted to copy. This court intelligence would open the door to a coaching career. After retiring as a player in 1975, Adelman spent years coaching high school basketball before returning to the NBA as an assistant with Portland in 1983, working under Hall of Fame coach Jack Ramsey, who had led the Trailblazers to the NBA championship in 1977 with his legendary Bill Walton team. It was here that Adelman absorbed fundamental principles about ball movement and spacing that would later explode his career. When Ramsey departed, Adelman remained on the Blazers staff as an assistant, but when the new head coach was fired midway through the 1988-89 season, Adelman got his chance. Initially named interim head coach, he quickly demonstrated his tactical brilliance by guiding Portland to the playoffs during, well, it was a rough stretch and a rough season. However, he did well enough that the interim tag disappeared, and one of the NBA's most influential coaching careers officially began. What Adelman inherited wasn't a bad team, they had talent, but they weren't considered championship material either. Clyde Drexler was their one true star, an electric shooting guard who could score and create, and around him were quality players like Terry Porter, Jerome Kersey, and new all-star Kevin Duckworth. Solid professionals, but not franchise-altering superstars. No disrespect. How do you compete with teams like the Bulls, Pistons, and Lakers when you don't have multiple Hall of Famers on your roster? And what game-changing tactic would not only work with a team like this, but work with any team who wanted to win? That's the challenge Adelman faced. His answer would change basketball forever, but only when the time was right. However, the first thing he did was have success. He did this by identifying his team's strengths: athleticism, basketball IQ, and unselfishness. Rather than trying to play like everyone else, he built a system that maximized these attributes. With Rick in charge, Portland became one of the most fluid offensive teams in the league and shared the ball so much he would have up to 7 players in 1991 averaging over 10 points a game. Compared to Rudy T's 1994 Rockets, this was the complete opposite. But Rudy T's daring tactic would win championships and predict the future of the league. Could Adelman's now do the same in a different way? While the Blazers wouldn't always have the most efficient offense, they would rank well, but just not consistently. However, it was effective, and they would win a lot. At the heart of Rick's innovation, this early formation of his strategy and system emphasized constant motion, precise cutting, and exceptional ball movement. You know, if you're a current Lakers fan, the thing that they just don't do in the fourth quarter, ever. But while other teams back then relied on these isolation plays for their stars, Adelman's Blazers moved the ball quickly, creating openings through player movement rather than the one-on-one dominance. And it would transform Portland almost overnight. Well, not almost, literally in NBA terms. In his first full season in 89-90, the Trailblazers won 59 games, finished second in the Western Conference only to the last remnants of the Showtime Lakers and a very angry Pat Riley, and managed to increase their offensive rating to 9th in the league. For this, they would reach the NBA Finals. Unfortunately, the bad boy Pistons were designed to counter motion, then finesse, then not having bruises on your body, and were one Isaiah Thomas injury from winning 3 finals in a row. But they would just have to settle for a repeat championship in this case. However, the expectations for Adelman and the Blazers were now set: championship or bust. With Drexler as the focal point, Adelman had constructed an offense where every player remained in motion, screens were set at precise angles, and the ball was rarely stuck in one player's hands. However, this was simply the beginning of his career, the beginning of his revolutionary tactic. And yet, he had already unlocked his players to levels even they didn't think possible. Harry Porter evolved from a good point guard into an all-star under Adelman's guidance. His scoring average jumped from 14.9 to 17.6 points per game, while his assist numbers remained high.
Well, I just want to know how you got it out of that Terry Porter guy. I never thought that was going to work.
Yeah, well, he was a tough one, but, well, I think you just have to understand who you have and their talents, and you have to put them in spots where they can succeed. If you do that, then they're going to listen to you, and they're going to try to do what you want.
Jerome Kersey became one of the league's most efficient forwards, scoring easy buckets off of cuts and offensive rebounds that were generated by the system's spacing. Even role players like Cliff Robinson and Danny Ainge found perfect niches in Adelman's offense. And he wasn't just an offensive mastermind. What's often overlooked is how he built one of the NBA's most disciplined defensive units. During his tenure, the Blazers consistently ranked among the league's top 5 defenses. A balanced team like this, where they played with remarkable connectivity, rotations, and closing out and shooters with precision, is usually reserved for players and teams who, 1, love to play for their coach, and 2, love to win championships. This two-way excellence once again led Portland to the NBA Finals in 1992. And this was after they already got the #1 seed in 1991, but lost to a resurgent Los Angeles Lakers with Magic Johnson. However, in the 1992 NBA Finals, they would have a closer series, but of course, they were facing Michael Jordan's Bulls. They would take it to 6 games, but of course, Game 1 was the shrug game, where they decided to leave open MJ beyond the arc, and you know what? It was the right decision, because aside from that first half in Game 1, he shot his regular average or below it. And they would be tied 2-2 before falling short in Game 6. Still, an insanely respectable and almost forgotten attempt at stopping Michael Jordan's dynasty from lifting off. And it wouldn't be the last time Adelman would face Phil Jackson in what would become a decades-long tactical battle between Adelman's still developing strategy and Phil Jackson's legendary triangle. What made those Portland final runs so special was that while the team was talented, Clyde Drexler was really their only superstar, and even then, their MVP and a Hall of Famer, yes, but not always one of the top 5 players in the league. And he was by himself. And the Bulls had Jordan and Pippen. The Lakers had Magic and Worthy. The Pistons had Isaiah and Dumas. The Rockets had one of the best centers of all time in Hakeem Olajuwon. But Portland, they had the system. But something was still missing. Despite this early success, Adelman knew that there was more to be unlocked. Yes, his Blazers teams consistently ranked near the top of the league in assists, reflecting their commitment to sharing the ball. While you won't find passing data for back in the day, the Portland Trail Blazers did lead the league in assists in 1991 at 27.5 per game, which was 4 higher than the league average in that season. That value changes drastically depending on the years, but it did indicate how Adelman liked to play. And this wasn't just pretty basketball now. It was devastatingly effective, something that would become synonymous with Rick Adelman teams. During his 6 years with Portland, his Trailblazers won 291 games against just 154 losses. This gives him the still current record of the highest winning percentage of any coach in franchise history. They made the playoffs all 6 years and reached the Western Conference Finals 3 times. And his even temperament also set him apart from the era of fiery, angry coaches. He rarely raised his voice and instead pulled players aside for quick, focused conversations. This player-friendly approach built trust and brought complete buy-in to his system, and why so many players loved playing for him as their favorite coach of all time. Sadly, in his last 2 years in Portland, the Blazers would lose in the first round, and after Rudy T's Rockets dismantled them in round 1 in 1991, he would be fired. It was clear that there was still work to be done on his vision, given how someone like Petrovic flourished on other teams afterwards and was not properly used in the 1992 finals that might have allowed the Blazers more of a shot in a close Game 6, given they needed a bit more shooting. Regardless, Adelman would take a year away from coaching before joining the Warriors, where it was just a bad fit with a bad roster constructed by Don Nelson. He had left the team, but Adelman would not be discouraged. After another year off, he would make his choice. He would change basketball. He knew the team he would join, and he knew the team that would benefit from a vision developed and refined in Portland, and one that would make them live up to the nickname, the greatest show on court. Joining the team he once played for, the Sacramento Kings were now destined to be another overlooked franchise, transformed into a legitimate contender by Adelman's tactic. But before the results could come in, the team needed to understand exactly what made the strategy such a revolutionary idea, and Rick would need some assistance in pushing it to its limits. Its name, now cemented in history, was called the corner offense, a direct offshoot of the classic Princeton offense, whose inventor was actually working for the Kings. This tactic that he had a clear vision about now wasn't just X's and O's on a whiteboard. It represented a fundamental shift in basketball philosophy. While most coaches built systems around creating advantages for the individual stars with slow plays and slow pace, Adelman built one that created advantages through collective movement and intelligence. So definitely not a Dylan Brooks level playbook. This team-first approach would eventually become the template for modern NBA offenses, but in the early and late 1990s, it was truly basketball from the future. Everything from Portland with the cutting and passing over individual brilliance would make it the perfect counter to the isolation-heavy basketball. Rick saw the game differently. He took the Princeton offense, a system designed for undersized college teams without elite athletes, and reimagined it for NBA players. Then scoring. College basketball's deliberate movements became quick-hitting NBA actions. It thrived on the belief that 5 players moving in harmony could outperform superior individual talent, something he had proven could work in Portland, but lacked something crucial: constant motion from elite athletes and perfected read and react decision-making. What would happen if he could simply teach his players to make the right read on the court and not have to look to him from the sidelines? What if everyone understood where everyone else was going to be and passing could become second nature? And to have that, the corner offense needed a specific foundation. 3 players on the strong side where the ball is, 1 at the wing, 1 in the corner, and 1 skilled big man at the elbow or high post. The guys that were there were not just screen setters, they had to be facilitators as well as shooters. From this position, everything could be read and react. For example, if the ball started at the top of the play, as long as they could get it into that high post position, not to spoil anything, but someone like Chris Webber, all of the other players could then do some sort of cut that would make a lot of confusion for the defense and allow an open 3-point shot. If the defense simply sagged off of Webber or anyone in that position, he could shoot it. If they were too aggressive on him, then he could simply drive to the hoop for a dunk or a layup, or he could pass to the next big man. Alternatively, they could have a lot of other passes which would allow them to have big cuts, get open shots, get open layups. The whole idea was once the defense made a mistake, the ball would whip around like a hot potato until someone had an open look. And for something like this, where he didn't have to call plays and they would trust it to make the right read, he would need the right players. Players that were taught to make the next pass rather than hunting for their own shot, to the point that even behind over-the-head back passes were considered the right pass when it was the right read. Or when someone like Jason Williams, who was drafted by Sacramento and who physically couldn't make a normal pass, was allowed free reign to do what he wanted to do.
And Rick Adelman, shout out to Rick Adelman, my coach for Sacramento. He told me in the first game, he said, if you come down and throw a behind-the-back pass and it goes out of bounds, he said, don't worry about it. Next time, try it with your left hand. Kind of put a battery in back because it's kind of like, look, he got my back, man. He's like he knows I'm trying to win. So whatever I got to do to win, that's what I'm going to try to do.
Yeah. Fun basketball that could win. And that's what made basketball players and coaches absolutely love Adelman.
And Rick Adelman doesn't get the notoriety or the respect as a coach, because everywhere Rick went, he won. And he was a player's coach, man. Guys love playing for Rick, right? I thought this guy was amazing. As a basketball mind, as a coach, the way he treated players, the way he demanded that respect, but the way he also, allowed you to just be you and play.
What do you do when an offense transforms specialists into complete offensive threats? Well, it was about to happen. His offensive system became the great equalizer, allowing teams without top 5 players and talent to challenge the NBA elite. While he always elevated players to their peak during the years where he coached them, and in Portland this happened, it would be in Sacramento where the corner offense would reach its peak, with a roster perfectly suited to maximize every element of Adelman's basketball philosophy. But how would this style become a foundation of the modern NBA, where other teams would literally take players and call them Sacramento or Adelman, as Doc Rivers mentioned in his 2008 championship run with the Celtics? And could he take the fight to Phil Jackson again and prove his style of play could defeat even the mighty duo of Shaq and Kobe? Well, I think everyone would agree with me that it's very lucky for Sacramento that Rick Adelman was the coach that they got. In 1998, when he arrived to take over the Kings, the franchise had been basketball's equivalent of a wasteland. This wasn't just another coaching job, it was a chance to prove his offensive system could transform even the NBA's most hopeless situation. Before Adelman's arrival, the Kings were nothing short of terrible. They'd made the playoffs just twice in the previous 13 years. See, Sacramento was where NBA careers went to die, not flourish. The small market Kings couldn't attract big-name free agents, and the team played in an aging arena that lacked the amenities and features of newer NBA facilities. Most coaches would see this job as career suicide, but again, Rick Adelman saw opportunity. The challenge, however, was enormous, because how do you turn around a franchise that has no winning culture, limited financial resources, and little appeal to star players? The Kings had some young talent, guys like Jason Williams and Peja Stojakovic, but nobody considered them future contenders for MVP. They were just another lottery team expected to remain at the bottom of the standings. What made Adelman's situation even tougher was the competitive landscape of the Western Conference. The late 90s and early 2000s were dominated by powerhouse teams, living legends. The Lakers had Shaq and Kobe, the Spurs had Tim Duncan, the Trail Blazers, ironically, Timberwolves and Mavericks all had more talented rosters than the Kings. Building a winner seemed nearly impossible, but he had a secret weapon, his corner offense. He then identified players whose skills would flourish in his system regardless of their reputation around the league. This strategy began with one key acquisition that would change everything. For the 1999 season, the Kings signed free agent Vlad Divac, a skilled passing center who had spent most of his career with the Lakers. He was famously traded to the Charlotte Hornets for Kobe Bryant, hence why he was with that team. But now at 30 years old, he wasn't considered a franchise-changing player by most teams. But Adelman saw something others missed. His passing ability and basketball IQ made him the perfect centerpiece for the corner offense. A big man who could facilitate from the high post would open up countless cutting and shooting opportunities for everybody else. However, it was about 7 months before this that the Kings made an even bigger move, acquiring Chris Webber from the Washington Wizards. Webber had a reputation as a talented but difficult player. I mean, when you win Rookie of the Year with the Golden State Warriors under Don Nelson and then find a way to get yourself traded, you know, that's a justifiable reputation. Other teams were hesitant to even build around him, but Adelman believed in Webber's unique skill set, and you will see the result that it would have. He had elite passing, scoring versatility, and basketball intelligence. This made him ideal for the system. He was building a team where the ball would move quickly, decisions would be made collectively, and no single player would dominate the offense. While Webber would benefit a lot, but that wasn't because he was just asking for the ball. However, the transformation was swift and dramatic, and sexy. Sexy like if you, say, subscribe to the GOAT Authority. In Adelman's first season, a shortened season, the Kings improved from 27 wins and 55 losses to 27 wins again, but this time with only 23 losses. They would, however, lose 3-2 to the Jazz in the first round, but given they did not have a full season to gel, this was an excellent result. In the next year, the Kings would improve again, but not enough to rise above the 8th seed, and they would ultimately lose in the first round again, this time to the Lakers, who would become the champions. They were ready for that next step. In the third year under Adelman, they won 55 games, the highest number since they moved to California and made the playoffs as the 3rd seed. Not only that, they had improved their offense and defensive rating each season and were now already top 10 in both categories. Sadly, they would get swept by the defending champions and second-seeded Lakers. This was harder to take for the Kings because 3 out of the 4 games were very close, but Kobe Bryant's 48 points would clinch the series in Game 4. Star power had won again, the Lakers had won again, and Phil Jackson had won over Adelman again. But ultimately, a laughingstock franchise had become a legitimate contender in just 3 seasons under their new coach's program. And what made the Kings' offense so special wasn't that it was just effective now, it was beautiful to watch. Adelman's corner offense had become refined, and basketball purists fell in love with the Sacramento style of play. It was basketball as a flowing, cooperative art form rather than a series of isolation plays, and let's face it, in that era, it was called the dead ball era for a reason. It wasn't pretty. It was boring. People didn't like it, so the Kings were a breath of fresh air.
I like the style of play you guys brought to the league. Talking about this before the show, but to have 2 passing bigs with the IQ and the vision that you and Vlade had, and a bunch of shooters and a few playmakers around, you guys captivated basketball with your style of play.
And how this was done was, yes, using that core formation, but also different other variations that thrived on playmaking. Good fundamental basketball, where the 2 big men, if they were Webber and Divac, could play off of each other really well because they both had such incredible passing. And yeah, they could both do post-up moves if necessary. Webber would be the key for the entire offense in terms of his scoring, but it also allowed a lot of opportunity for Mike Bibby to play around that spacing to get a lot of great open shots. It was a democratic offense. It had everyone involved, And of course, in a slower era, even if a few people got more shots and more points, players loved being involved with this kind of offense because once more Adelman's system had elevated role players into key contributors, just like the Trailblazers. Doug Christie arrived in Sacramento viewed as just a solid defender. Under Adelman, he became a crucial offensive piece, averaging nearly 5 assists per game while shooting over 40% from three-point range. Bobby Jackson, a name probably none of you have heard, transformed from a journeyman guard into the 6th man of the year in 2003. The system generated open looks naturally, and if everyone did their jobs, yes, someone might shoot the ball a bit more, in this case it would be Chris Webber, but everyone had their best seasons under Adelman. Yes, the roster was talented, and yes, Chris Webber had those MVP level performances for them. He would become a Hall of Famer. But what they lacked in that absolute superstar power, they made up for with how they played together to maximize the amazing talent that they did have. And Coach Rick was at the center of this. And it was in this 2001 season that they earned their nickname, the greatest show on court. Now the problem is, while they had been swept in the second round of the season by the Lakers, by the 2001-2002 season, the Kings were no longer just an exciting team. They were legitimate title contenders. They finished the league with a league-best 61-win record and the #1 seed in the Western Conference. And this was a competitive Western Conference. Yet, the Kings' offensive rating was 3rd, the defensive rating was 6th, and the team Adelman had built had the best record. And it was the most balanced, a rare feat. And come playoff time, they would trump the Jazz in round 1, smash the Dallas Mavericks led by Don Nelson in round 2, and Adelman would have the chance to face the Los Angeles Lakers for a shot at reaching his 3rd NBA Finals in 12 years. And he would have a chance at revenge, not only for the Kings, but for himself versus Phil Jackson. The matchup was perfect, the small market Kings with their flowing democratic offensive system against the star-powered Lakers under Phil Jackson. Now obviously the triangle is something similar, but Shaq and Kobe would dominate. Could Rick finally see his tactic presented in its peak form and be able to transform it into a championship-winning philosophy? Or would other forces and luck intervene once more to show that Jackson had the upper hand? The Lakers came in like back-to-back champions, shooting 67% in the first quarter and putting up 36 points before Sacramento could blink. Kobe dropped 30, Shaq looked unstoppable, the Kings fought, but the message was sent. The Lakers were still the mountain to climb. Advantage Phil Jackson and Los Angeles. Something was off about Kobe Bryant in Game 2 though. His energy was down and his shots were flat. Later we found out he was suffering from food poisoning, allegedly from a meal at the team hotel, but the Kings didn't care, no one cared, and Webber and Bibby took over. O'Neal still dropped 35 points, but Sacramento matched him blow for blow. They grabbed the win, even the series, and shattered LA's record-setting 12-game road playoff win streak. Well, they weren't gonna get swept like the previous season, but back in Los Angeles, the Kings didn't just win, they humiliated the Lakers. They led by 27 points at one stage and never trailed. It was the most dominant performance Sacramento had ever delivered in the playoffs. The corner offense was singing, the 5-man motion, backdoor cuts, crisp passing. Every shot felt like a dagger. Bibby and Webber combined for 50 points, Christie played like a man possessed, and the Staples Center was stunned into silence. The Kings had just punched the champs in the mouth with a 2-1 series lead, and people were starting to believe. And it didn't stop there. In Game 4, the Kings opened with 40 points in the first quarter, slicing through LA's defense with unselfish passes so accurate it looked like they were on rails. No one held the ball longer than they had to, and they built a 24-point lead in front of, again, a stunned Staples Center's crowd. However, just before halftime, a Samaki Walker heave from beyond the arc beat the buzzer. Also, the refs said. Replays would later show that the shot was late, but in 2002 there was no review. Although honestly, even in 2025, it feels like sometimes there's no review. The Lakers got their free 3 points and the momentum. The second half was a slow bleed. LA chipped away in the Phil Jackson triangle style that they had, the Kings' lead shrank, and in the final seconds, with Sacramento up by 2, chaos erupted under the basket. Kobe missed a driving layup, Shaq missed the tip, and Vlade Divac instinctively slapped the ball out away from the hoop, right into the waiting hands of Robert Horry. Three-point shot, buzzer, game by Big Shot Rob. The series was tied, but the aftershock would linger for the Kings. The best team in basketball had played nearly perfect against the defending champs and still lost. But hey, Rick Adelman was their coach. He didn't yell when they loved playing for him. They were going to play hard no matter what. Game 5 was a fistfight. Absolutely gritty all the way through, neither team could create separation, and the Lakers led most of the fourth. Then, with 8 seconds left, came the biggest shot of Mike Bibby's life. Adelman and the Kings were now 3-2 up and ready to go to the NBA Finals. They just needed one more. However, Game 6 would become the most controversial game in NBA history. From the opening tip, it was physical, but in the fourth quarter, the whistle became impossible to ignore. Los Angeles attempted 27 free throws in the final 12 minutes, more than Sacramento had taken all game. The Lakers shot 40 free throws in total compared to 25 for Sacramento. Even so, the Kings battled hard for Adelman and their team, but with the foul trouble that they had, it wasn't quite enough. After no call and no call, the game was sealed. Michael Wilbon of the Washington Post would later write that 6 calls in the fourth quarter were stunningly incorrect, all against Sacramento. One of the most glaring was Kobe Bryant's elbow to the face of Mike Bibby, and there would be no whistle despite it being right in front of the ref. Game 7 was now inevitable, but so was the rage. Could Rick Adelman light a fire under his players to go to battle against the Lakers one more time? This Game 7 had it all. 16 ties, 19 lean changes, and in the final seconds, the Kings were down 1 point. Peja Stojakovic had a clean look from the corner to take the lead, and it airballed. Fortunately, Bibby was fouled and hit 2 clutch free throws to force the overtime. But in the extra period, the Kings finally stalled. Sacramento had shot 2 of 20 from 3 for the night. They missed 14 free throws in total, and for the first time in weeks, no, seasons, no one could step up when it mattered most. But basketball isn't always fair. The Kings had their shot, and when you miss 14 free throws, you kind of look like Shaq. And much like Mike D'Antoni's Rockets, who missed 27 threes in a row to beat the Warriors and failed, the Kings' dream season was over. Even in defeat, Adelman's team represented something special. Proof that basketball played the right way could compete with superstar-driven teams. To push the Lakers, who would three-peat that season, to the brink of elimination without a single top 5 player in the league. And it was Adelman's system that made it possible. But the pain for Chris Webber would remain.
After Game 6, it was like they took my heart, man. Should have made our free throws Game 7. But I can't lie, it was after Game 6,
Between Webber and Mike Bibby and Stojakovic, they had all reached their peak of what they could become in the league and within the system. It allowed them to focus on what they did best while hiding what they couldn't do. Webber had his best seasons under Adelman, making the All-NBA first team in 2001. He had 27 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, yet the offense never revolved around him exclusively. It just flowed through him. Everyone else hit their peaks, and it wasn't a coincidence.
The game was so beautiful because none of us cared who's going to score. We learned that making a sacrifice for your teammate, as far as making a hard cut, is not going to make you always open, but it's going to make somebody else open. And if you set a good screen, somebody else is going to get open. And this became contagious. We started thinking for others. Instead of thinking for ourselves.
They would win 59 games in 2003, 55 in 2004. They would make the playoffs in all 8 of Adelman's season as head coach, but they could not get over the hump of the absolute monstrous power of the Western Conference. In that era, there was Kevin Garnett's Timberwolves, he would win an MVP, Dirk's Mavericks, who would end up in the finals in 2006, and of course, the Spurs and the Lakers. From 2001 to 2005, they were consistently among the top offensive teams in the NBA. This sustained excellence demonstrated that their success wasn't a fluke, Adelman's tactic was kinda overpowered, and it was a result of a system perfectly executed. But perhaps this tactic needed to be applied in a different way to compete for a championship. By the time Adelman would leave Sacramento in 2006, he had completely transformed the franchise. They had become one of the league's most respected organization in terms of good basketball, and for the first time ever, players actually kinda wanted to go play in Sacramento under Adelman. Sadly, the Kings have not maintained this aura in 2025, or since then. So why didn't Adelman's Kings win a championship despite this tactical brilliance? See, in the critical late-game moments when defense is locked in, having a special individual with special talent who could simply dominate a defense sometimes proved, no, it always proved, a good power play that has been used in every season the NBA has existed. Someone to close, someone to facilitate. And the Kings' democratic approach occasionally meant no single player took control when it was needed most. Maybe Adelman's overpowered strategy needed at least one or two bigger stars to unlock its true potential. And that's a very scary thought considering how good it had been so far. After his time in Sacramento, Rick Adelman found himself with a new challenge in 2007, the Houston Rockets. Taking over from Jeff Van Gundy, Adelman inherited a team with two legitimate superstars in Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming. This pairing gave Adelman something he never had in Sacramento: multiple elite talents who could potentially overwhelm opponents with their skill, in addition to dominating with the Adelman corner offense. Tracy McGrady had a peak as high as Kobe's, having led the league in scoring, but just hadn't found himself with the right coach, system, team, and health. Both him and Yao embraced Adelman's corner offense immediately and without hesitation. The ball movement and player cutting perfectly complemented Yao's passing ability from the post and McGrady's scoring versatility. Even Ron Artest, who joined the team in 2008 and was known as having a difficult personality, became a perfect fit in Adelman's system. He just had the ability to make players find their joy in playing beautiful basketball. Artest, who later changed his name to Metta World Peace, was so impressed with Adelman's coaching that he made a shocking statement when asked to compare him to the legendary Phil Jackson.
There's a reason I choose Rick, because I play for both. But let me tell you why I choose Rick.
Okay.
One year he let us do the defense. Like literally, Rick practice short.
Yeah.
Practice 45 minutes. You in and out.
Yep.
So sometimes we don't go over defense. So, he let us work. I was like, wow, this is incredible. We get a chance. Coach is out.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Rick.
All right,
Okay.
I like that.
Coming from a player who would later win a championship with Jackson's Lakers in 2010, this spoke volumes about the respect Adelman commanded from his players. In the first season, they won 55 games with the second-rated defense in the league. This also included an impressive 22-game winning streak, the second longest in NBA history at that time, second to the super team of the 1972 Lakers, and by the way, the only teams to go ahead of the Rockets in this streak were LeBron's Heat super team and the Golden State Warriors with Stephen Curry. Adelman had successfully implemented his tactic here with new personnel, proving once again that his basketball philosophy could work with different types of players. Sadly, the Rockets story under Rick quickly became a what-if rather than a championship celebration. The promising core was consistently undermined by injuries. McGrady's chronic back and knee problems limited his availability and effectiveness. Yao Ming's foot injuries became increasingly problematic, eventually forcing him into early retirement from basketball. They would have T-Mac in the first-round playoff matchup in 2008, but they wouldn't have Yao Ming, and they would be knocked out. In 2009, it was another opportunity for the playoffs to exemplify both the potential of Adelman's Rockets and their cruel fate. They entered the postseason without McGrady, who was now sidelined with a season-ending injury. Despite missing their perimeter star, they still defeated the Portland Trail Blazers in the first round. However, they would then match up against the Kobe Bryant retooled Los Angeles Lakers in the second round, with Phil Jackson once more on the other bench. And even though they had lost Yao Ming to a hairline fracture in his foot in Game 3 and didn't have Tracy McGrady, the series would still go to Game 7 because of Adelman. He completely overhauled his strategy mid-series, utilizing the smaller lineups that could switch defensively and spread the floor offensively. Players like Aaron Brooks, Luis Scola, and Shane Battier stepped up, executing this lighter version of the corner offense to near perfection, but it just simply would not be enough. And this brings us to the central paradox of Rick Adelman's coaching career. And after 2009, Yao Ming would sadly only ever play 5 more games before retiring, and McGrady would never be the same player again. How could a coach who would finish out his career a few seasons later with 1,042 wins, multiple conference finals appearances, and a Hall of Fame induction never be able to capture an NBA championship? Aside from the injuries in Houston and not having those big-name superstars in general throughout his career, the fact that he was coaching those small market teams would all create issues. They struggled with financial limitations that impacted roster construction and the ability to keep players. The Kings, for example, couldn't afford to keep their core together long-term and lost key players to larger markets. Some critics suggested Adelman's system itself had weaknesses that were exploited in playoff basketball. The read and react nature of the corner offense required precise timing and basketball IQ from all 5 players on the floor. When defense intensified in the playoffs, sometimes this intricate system faced challenges against teams with simpler, star-driven approaches. Yet, that is not the correct way to view his body of work. This was an overpowered tactic, for it did change the NBA forever. But how? The most powerful evidence of Adelman's impact is seen in today's NBA. The emphasis on spacing, ball movement, a versatile big man who can pass from the high post, these concepts that define modern basketball were all central to Adelman's coaching philosophy. You see, more than 2/3 of the league's 30 teams run some version of his plays. Even coaches who never worked directly under him have incorporated these concepts. Doc Rivers, for instance, remembers studying Sacramento's offensive sets and later implementing them in crucial situations. And this was in Boston in 2008 when they won the championship. He called the play Adelman as a sign of respect. George Karl, another coaching legend, praised Adelman as always ahead of the curve in offensive innovation. When you watch the Warriors swing the ball around the perimeter or you see Nikola Jokic thread passes from the high post, you're witnessing Rick Adelman's fingerprints on modern basketball. And that's a nice little connective tissue because the current coach of the Nuggets is his son. Even Eric Spoelstra, who grew up in Portland and grew up in the Adelman house as well, said,
"And he's a damn good basketball coach. He's proved it over the years as an innovator in so many different regards. Almost every single team in this league copies a portion of his offense."
With none other than El Jefe Popovich saying, "But I've stolen from him very honestly." The greatest coaches don't just win games, they change how the game is played with overpowered tactics. And while Adelman was an offensive genius, so was Frank Vogel, a defensive one. And he did win a championship. So why was he fired for being too good at his job?